Hello Internet! It's time now for a new show on my channel, Historical Gaming with Max Von Puppet. That's me. In this show, I'll be discussing the general history of games throughout the world, or maybe the specific history of a particular game, or, as in today's episode, I'll be discussing a particular game, maybe one that we don't see much of anymore, like this one right here. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about one of my favorite historical games. It's a game that was played by Vikings, and delivered by them throughout Europe as they raided their way up and down the coast. That's right, folks, this is a Viking board game. Or rather, it's a family of board games called Tafl, an Old Norse term for table or board. The basic defining feature of a Tafl game is that it has uneven sides, with one side outnumbering the other by 2 to 1. The Vikings like to play games that weren't fair. Makes sense, you know, they're Vikings. Tafl games are mentioned throughout the Viking sagas, and there are variants of them throughout Celtic, Welsh, German, and Breton cultures from the 4th to 12th centuries. Now, you can buy variants of this game today, the most common of which is the one that I have in front of me. It's often sold as King's Table, but the research done on Tafl games has the game called Tafl, which is Old Norse for King's Table, shows that variant using a larger board with more pieces, and there appears to be some argument about whether or not dice were used in its play. Historically speaking, this version is called Tablet. Tablet comes from the travel diary of a man named Carl Linnaeus, a Swedish botanist, physician, and zoologist. In 1732, he traveled to Lapland, where he observed this game and recorded it in his journal. It's probably the most complete description of any Tafl game we have today. Unfortunately, he didn't speak the language of the people playing the game and only wrote down the rules as he saw them being played. As a result, there's a lot of rules questions that we don't have answers to in his description. This is actually one of the biggest issues when discussing historical games. There's often not much written down about them, as, historically speaking, they're not considered that important. Births and deaths of kings, wars, major political movements, those were worth recording. Even stories and fables were considered worth recording by some, but games were not often considered worth tracking. There's probably a lot of reasons why this is the case, such as games are often fads that don't last very long, or are played only in a specific region and never reach the popularity of, say, chess, of which we know a lot. But whatever the reason, it makes it difficult to have a discussion about historical games. But thankfully, Linnaeus got a pretty detailed description of the rules of Tablet, and that's what we're going to go over right now. Here's Tablet as described by Linnaeus. The game is played on a 9x9 board, and the pieces are set up as you see here. These inner, lighter pieces, the defenders, are called the Swedes by Linnaeus, and these darker outer pieces are the attackers, called the Muscovites. This gold piece in the middle is the Swede king, and he starts in a special square called the castle. No one but the king can occupy the castle. As you can see, the castle is a different color than the rest of the board. It's gold, in this case. All the pieces in the game move basically like a rook in chess. That is, they can move any number of squares in straight lines, vertically and horizontally, but they can't move diagonally. Pieces are not allowed to move through other pieces. You capture a piece by surrounding it on at least 2 sides by one of your own pieces. So, for example, if this defender piece were right here, and this attacker piece were right here, we could move another attacker piece, like let's say this guy, over here, and then that defender would be captured. But vice versa for the defenders and the attackers, you can capture from either side. The exception to this rule, of course, is the king, who can only be captured if he is surrounded on all 4 sides. So the castle square is a special case square. It counts towards capture. So, for example, let's do a little bit of a setup here. Let's move these 2 guys off the board. And let's say this Muscovite was right here. Now, I can then move a Swede piece around when it's his turn. Let's say he's here. I can move him right there, and this Muscovite counts as captured because the castle is an immovable square. Nobody can go through it, and it counts towards capture. It's kind of like this game's version of being stuck between a rock and a hard place. This rule also holds true for the king. Linnaeus never specifically states in his journal if the king can return to the castle, but the rules suggest that he can't. Now, the object of the game is for the Swedes to get the king to the edge of the board where he can escape. So any edge will do. This right here counts that it's an escape. There's an escape. There's an escape. The object for the Muscovites is to capture the king, which, as we stated earlier, means he has to be surrounded on all four sides. As you can see, that rule makes it a lot easier for the Swede player to win. Personally, I prefer playing with a variant rule where the king can only escape if he can reach one of the corners. This makes it a little more difficult for the Swede player and creates a little bit of a balance between the two sides. I also play with a variant rule that says that pieces in a corner, like this guy, can be captured if you can surround them on either side of the corners, like this. So if that piece were there and that piece were there, this guy here would be captured and taken off the board. This prevents the attacker from just sitting on the corners and preventing the king from escaping. Otherwise, I pretty much play the way that Linnaeus described in his journal. As I said before, there are a ton of variations of this game out there. You can easily make a board for this game yourself and play with whatever pieces you have available, or if you're not the crafty type, you can go out and buy one. I once saw a suggestion by someone that Nef and Tafl could be played on an 11 by 11 board and use Warhammer 40,000 figures to represent the two sides. That sounds awesome. Well, that's pretty much all I have to say on the Viking game of Tafl. I hope you enjoyed this. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you know of another historical game you'd like me to discuss, or were curious about the origin of some of the games we play today, like, say, hopscotch, let me know that too, and maybe I'll do a video of that. In the meantime, I'll be back next week with another historical game to enjoy. Until then, keep playing games. Bye!